Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Making the Argument. I am your host, of course, Nick Freitas, a member of the Virginia House of Delegates, but other than that, a reasonably good guy. I do not have my usual cohorts with me today because we have a very, very important guest, very special guest. I'm really excited about this. I've been fanboying a little bit because what we're going to talk about today is what in the living hell is going on in Hollywood. And some people have come to the conclusion that Hollywood's just lost its mind, right? It's always been a little bit quirky, but now it's just crazy. And I'm going to submit to you that I don't know that that's actually what's going on. I don't know that they have lost their mind. In fact, I think the far more maybe dangerous prospect here is that they know exactly what they're doing, which is pretty terrifying when you consider the fact that they have just done their level best over the last several years on killing some of the characters that we grew up with, that we love, some of the series, some of the lore, whatever it is, and wherever you kind of are on this whole, genre between fantasy or science fiction or just good storytelling within the movies, it seems like something drastic has taken place in a relatively short period of time. And I know as I was watching this, I was kind of confused by it, right? I just thought, again, is this just sucky writing or is something else going on here? And I come across this channel, right? This channel called Nerdrotic. And all of a sudden, this guy is just this guy is verbalizing everything that I had been frustrated about within the entertainment industry. And not only is he talking about some of the nuances with respect to things they're doing that we just kind of don't like or we find irritating, but he's actually going beyond kind of that superficial analysis and asking really important questions about what's going on and then offering some suggestions on why it's going on that we just felt incredibly intriguing. So, Gary, thank you very much for joining us today, host of Nerdrotic.
Thank you for having me on. It's an honor. I watch your stuff all the time, and because my wife shows it to me all the time, which is great. No, I love it. I love it. So that's how I found it, and I appreciate you having me on. This is great.
Well, that's the key. If we win over the wives, we know we'll get the husbands. That's
right.
And your beard game is strong. So,
cheers. So is yours. Well done.
Thank you. Well, hey, listen. First thing I want to do is I want to kind of again we're going to delve into why this is going on and some of the key players and what can be done about it, which I think is an important aspect of this conversation. But first and foremost, dude, you've got a hell of a story, man. Tell us a little bit. In fact, I think you got a book coming out. Your YouTube channel just hit 1 million subscribers. It's about time, by the way, because I've been wondering for a while. I'm like, gosh, this guy is spitting gold. And so it was so great. It's great to see your success on YouTube. Tell us a little bit about you and kind of, maybe what's going to come out in the book a little bit.
We'll try to keep this as brief as possible. Thank you again. And yeah, hit 1 million subs. It's surreal. It only took 10 years. And yeah, it's a weird story of just a rough childhood, and then a really rough childhood, kind of get my crap together, and then falling back into I'm a recovering alcoholic and addict. So and yes, I have a book coming out. It's not about YouTube. It's basically I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, very proud member, although I'm supposed to be anonymous. And it's when you share your story at a meeting, it's you have to share your experience, your strength, and your hope. Kind of like how'd you get here? Well, what happened? How'd you get here? And how'd you get out of it, basically. And that's what the book's going to be about. And it's hopefully the message will be it's not some kind of vanity project, because my addiction was pretty bad. I ended up in prison, got out of prison, kind of got my life together, and then I relapsed later, which was pretty horrific. Didn't end up back in prison, but almost lost everything and kind of put my life back together with the help of my family and my kids. And then this YouTube thing happened, like in my late 40s. It was really bizarre, but it's the ebbs and flows of life and how we kind of overcome adversity. And, even in my darkest hours, I never wanted to give up for some reason. Couldn't tell you why, but that's what the book's going to be about.
No, that's awesome.
It's crazy. It's weird that last year was like my 30th year that I walked out of prison.
Wow.
Like it had been 30 years, and I didn't think I was going to make it 3 minutes out. So it can happen. And we certainly get into like a little bit, the problems in the prison system and, and how we deal with rehabilitation, and because it actually worked on me. So
yeah,
I'm one of I think it's 8%.
Yeah.
The recidivism is freaking horrible. It's absolutely horrible. But it's been a crazy journey. I'm just grateful to be alive. I'm having more fun than I've ever had. And even fallen off the wagon a couple of times on like multiple different drugs. I pretty much tried them all.
Yeah.
And liked them all. And I mean, it killed me twice, technically. My heart stopped beating twice when I was younger. And just to be here and living in gratitude, it's for the addict out there who still suffers, I just try to tell them, get a meeting, go to a meeting, get a sponsor. If things do get better, it's not easy. It takes a lot of time. And, I just hit 10 years.
Yeah.
And the first 6, well, okay, they weren't that great. but I made it. And now life is pretty good.
Yeah.
Except for everything I love falling apart.
Yeah.
with my hobbies.
Well, and here's the deal. Like, first of all, I mean, I appreciate you telling that story, right? Because the redemption component of this is really, really important, because it's not just, anytime we deal with things like addiction or whatnot, if it's just focusing on the things that you're not supposed to do or that you can't do, and it's not actually giving someone hope for something that they can do or an alternative to that thing which has controlled so much of their life, it's not hard to see why people relapse. But when they've got a hope, when they've got something they can focus on, that's just awesome. So thank you for being willing to share it. And I guess part of you starting Nerdrotic 10 years ago was, I mean, part of that was trying to like stay in touch with the things that you cared about, your hobbies, your interests, and whatnot. Tell us a little bit about like why you started that up and what was the arc of that? Because like you said, 10-year process. I found you a year ago. But like, what was the process from that being something that you started as kind of a way to stay in touch to, I mean, all of a sudden something really huge on YouTube?
Thank you. But again, it's strange. So I had a comic store in San Francisco. It's kind of a meme now, but I owned one for 10 years. And my relapse led to me selling it. Right. That's so I had to sell it. But at the comic store, we podcast once in a while. I'm like, man, that's fun. I like it. So once I sold the comic store, and again, this is because I relapsed and I had to, like, it was my family or the comic store. Is a pretty easy decision. Comic store goes. Rebuild the life. And while I'm rebuilding my life, what I remembered from getting sober before was you need hobbies, you need things to do outside of going to meetings, you need to go to the gym, you need to have a good hobby outside of, everything else. So I'm like, hey, I want to stay in touch. The one thing I'm going to miss the most about being in the comic store is being behind that counter every day and just talking to people, it was the best job in the world. My clients were freaking awesome. And so podcasting is kind of you do that, especially when it's interactive on YouTube, which I eventually got to. So yeah, I started a podcast when I was like 7 or 8 days sober, just to be a hobby. That's all it was there for. I didn't expect anybody to ever listen to it. It's just me and a friend. We recorded our first episode. I lived in San Francisco at the time at the Starbucks in West Portal. We just recorded there because we had nowhere else to record. So, and I think it's on my website somewhere.
Oh, that's great. That's great. When when you started off, so when people talk about like nerd culture, geek culture or whatnot, I mean, that's usually, sci-fi, fantasy genre, comic books, superheroes, things like that. Why were these things important to you? Because I'll tell you what, I grew up and, my dad and mom split up when I was young. My dad was a police officer. My mom was a nurse. And I spent a lot of time with my grandfather. And so when I grew up, everything was like John Wayne, Clint Eastwood, James Bond, cop shows, war movies. Like, so that was my escape part. That was the part that I used to watch for entertainment. I just really loved it. It wasn't until I had kids that I started getting more into like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings. if you would have told me earlier on when I was younger that I'd watch anime, I'm like, now you're out of your mind, right? But now, like, I'm a big One Punch Man fan, right? Like, and so what caused you to like just really be interested in this and just kind of do a deep dive and understanding like the culture of it, the lore associated with it? What was that, and what are some of your favorites?
Ooh, I was into it young. I spent when I was like 3 or 4. My earliest memories are I watched Batman 1966 with Adam West, George Reeves, Superman, and Star Trek. Those were just on all the time, and I just loved it. And my mom and dad worked when I was, which was strange back in the very early 70s. But I remember just being parked in front of Grandma's TV, suffering through her soap operas, and then waiting for Star Trek and Batman and Superman to come on. And I was hooked. That was it. I'm like, this is what I love. This is my jam. And then I saw on the Electric Company, I don't know if you remember the Electric Company, used to come on right after Sesame Street. They had Spidey Super Stories, and Spider-Man would be running around. He wouldn't talk. He'd just talk in thought bubbles to teach how to read. And I'm like, that costume's cool. I love it. So went and bought a comic book. My first comic book, I'll never forget it. It's Marvel Team Up number 42, Spider-Man and Vision, because I like Spider-Man's costume. I just thought it was cool. Yeah. And that was it. I mean, I was into all the Planet of the Apes movies, and there was Godzilla and Planet of the Apes and Twilight Zones being played all the time when I was a kid. I lived in San Diego County, so I got all the LA stations, which big deal back then. Instead of 3 stations, we got like 6.
Oh, bougie.
Real bougie. You had a good enough antenna, maybe 8. But and some lucha libre wrestling out of Tijuana, which was awesome, by the way. That's how I became a nerd. Once I started looking at the comics, because I couldn't read them right away, I was like, this is my world. I freaking love it. It brings me so much joy and happiness. And then, Star Wars comes out, and that just blows everything up, and I'm like, that's the greatest thing I've ever seen. And so it was just early on. I was just born this way. I was born a nerd. I was always meant to do this stuff.
I got to say that was the one that because I was born in 79. And so that was Star Wars was one that I just remember sitting there watching on, when I'd go down and stay with my dad and he'd go after work and whatnot. And I would just sit there and like watch Star Wars over and over and over again. I got to say though, like I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble for admitting this. I never liked Luke when I watched Star Wars. I was always a Han Solo fan. Like I always thought Han Solo and Chewie were just awesome. And I thought Luke was a little bit whiny.
Yeah, people have said that. I feel differently. I mean, I don't like him now because he was played by Mark Hamill and he's an a-hole, but I'm starting to see Rian Johnson's point of view now.
Somebody was telling me the other day, they're like, what do you make of Mark Hamill? He was saying something. I said, I think he's turned into the Disney version of himself.
He has completely. Yeah. That was an accurate portrayal.
I like the George Lucas version so much better because by the time he got to Empire Strikes Back and then definitely Return to Jedi, I'm like, okay, I like this guy. But I just remember always loving Han Solo. In fact, I did have the Han Solo blaster when I was little. And I remember coming, school year was over. I think it was like in elementary school. And then I came down to Southern California to see my dad. And I was asking, like, where's my blaster at? He's like, oh, I gave it to the neighbor kid. And I was just like, how could you give my Han Solo blaster to the neighbor kid? I don't even know this neighbor kid.
Et tu, Dad?
Yeah.
Just go get it back.
Oh, yeah.
No. That's, as a former comic store owner, there wouldn't be comic stores if moms and dads weren't giving stuff away all the time. So thanks, moms and dads. But yeah, Han Solo's cooler by far.
Yeah.
Like, he's the trucker. Luke is the farm boy. And the trucker and his dog, his little pet, because that was the 70s. Any which way but loose. That was the 70s. That's the way it was back then, and it worked. It's so until Disney destroyed it.
Somebody's asking, like, why do you like Han Solo so much? I was like, well, okay, think about it, right? The guy's a smuggler. He's always got a gun. So big 2A advocate. He hates tariffs and trade policy. Like, I love this guy. This is what's not to like. All right, let's. I want to ask you this because so you're not just someone that enjoyed this, right? This was part of how you made a living. It was something that was very important to you from the time that you were a kid, and I think that's something that people need to realize when you have a character that you grew up with that was, important to you during those formative years of your life, right? And this was also at a time when a lot of our heroes and our characters were people that went through this kind of complex arc where they either started off as kind of the whiny farm kid, or, you know, the rogue that only cared about himself, and then they turn into something where they care about other people and they have a higher mission in life and they feel called to it, right? Like that character arc that we all love, that works, that we relate to. And I think it calls out something good in ourselves. And then all of a sudden in Hollywood, I'm starting to see this character arc shift a little bit. And I want to bring up a kind of the difference between something that's just bad writing and something that seems deliberate. So season 8 of Game of Thrones. Now, regardless of what you think about Game of Thrones, like when it got to season 8, I remember thinking, this is just crap. Like, this seems like two guys that just got offered a better deal and they just want to hurry up and get it done with. And obviously at that point, they didn't have the books to go off of anymore. They're kind of making up as go along, and they were nowhere near as talented in that respect. But I remember thinking when I was watching that, I'm like, okay, this is bad writing, but I don't feel like it's nefarious. I just feel like it's lazy. And now is the time of the show where we remind you that if you want to get the most quality meat you possibly can on the planet, you go to goodranchers.com. And guess what? There is a new deal. When you go to goodranchers.com, when you put in promo code Nick and you sign up for one of the subscriptions, you're now going to get free chicken wings for a year, right? That is 2 pounds of jumbo chicken wings in every order that comes to your house. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going into March Madness. We're going into sports season, right? I don't care where you look. There's going to be something. There's going to be something going on. And for the next year, you will have wings because of the good people at Good Ranchers. Right? Because when you go into the grocery store and you see the little American flag and you think, oh, this is an American product. Yeah, maybe not. Maybe not. But when you go to Good Ranchers, you never have to worry about it. So, goodranchers.com, promo code Nick, sign up for one of the subscriptions, and you're going to get 2 pounds of jumbo wings free with every single order for a year. Every sporting event, you will be ready thanks to Good Ranchers and your own good common sense. Goodranchers.com, promo code Nick. Go check it out. But when I was watching like the new Star Wars movies coming out, I was like, this is not just lazy writing. This is not just bad. This is an agenda. So here's my question. Was there a point in a movie you were watching or a series you were watching or whatever it is when you came to the conclusion that, no, this is not just bad writing. This is not just lazy. This is deliberate, and there's a bigger reason behind it?
Yes, there was. And it was kind of in tandem because they were close enough together. It was, and this is like over a year. So I'm a big Doctor Who fan. They turned the Doctor into a woman. And why did they do it? Because we're going to turn it into a woman. They didn't make it a story decision. For one, there's plenty of female Time Lords you could have just made a series on that every Doctor Who fan would have watched, especially at the height of its popularity.
Yeah.
And then The Last Jedi comes out. And then Star Trek comes out. So it was like within a year, there's like this Star Trek that has a black female captain. That's very Star Trek. No big deal. But they made her Spock's stepsister, which is what? What is that? And then made the Doctor a woman. And then they did what they did to Luke. It was bad enough. Force Awakens couldn't stand it. Han walking into a lightsaber with his stupid son was just horrible. Worse when you degrade and subvert and belittle and humiliate Luke Skywalker, the hero of generations, have him drinking out of a space manatee boob. The symbolism there was, I mean, it's purposeful. They think about this stuff a lot. That's exactly what they wanted to show. Having him get knocked down by Rey the first time he meets, and then he ODs on the Force. It's like, what was that? That's when, over that year of time, I'm like, there is something more to this. And it sounded crazy back then. It sounded completely insane. It's like they're social engineering and purposefully destroying characters because they believe characters like Luke Skywalker and Captain Kirk support the patriarchy and old unjust systems and colonizing. I'm like, that sounds insane. I sound like an insane person. And here we are today in 2024. Sweet Baby Inc. is going on. The whole thing in gaming is going on. And it's like, oh, yeah, because that already happened in Hollywood and in comic books and music and in knitting, in the knitting community. I mean, it's everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere. My good friend Carrie Smith reported on that for the first time a long time ago, and we had to have her on because I'm like, what? For one, there's a knitting community, and then it got invaded by a bunch of activists, and people were canceling people. Yes, so comics are lost. Hollywood is lost. Our education system is lost because too many people on the right walked away, didn't pay attention, did not take pop culture and our culture seriously. Now, not everybody. There's a lot of people who, like you and the late, great Andrew Breitbart, understood it. Other people understand it, but a lot of people don't. And this is how they get to our kids. This is how they get to our adults, because it is our culture. It's the soundtrack of our lives. It is the movie of our lives. It is where we get most of our information, and it's just on in the background, and a lot of stuff happens through osmosis. And they being the hardcore progressive Marxist, whatever you want to call them, woke, the kind of people who push DEI, they have been there all along, and they understand this, and they are open about it. They are completely open about it. They're and it's only when you shine a light directly from like the mainstream media, because a lot of us, and there's people who've been talking about it longer than I have, but a lot of us have been talking. We're going on a decade now talking about this, and it had been creeping in before, but after The Last Jedi, I'm like, nope, there's something going on here, and it turned out it was.
No, it was. I remember that was a. I was watching something a Critical Drinker had done.
Yes.
On why modern movies suck, and one of the things he was talking about, and this has been a theme you've talked a lot about it as well, was this whole concept. It wasn't good enough for them to just create new characters for us to love, right? It wasn't something where they just said, okay, we're gonna have a female Jedi. Okay, cool. There's already female Jedis within the lore. That's a problem. You want to go with Ashoka? You want to go fine, but no. It was. But before we give you this new hero that doesn't need any training. They're just wonderful. Great. Their only problem was they didn't believe in themselves enough. We're going to destroy your old ones so that you got nothing to go back to. And I remember when he said that, it resonated with me. And so describe a little bit of like this whole idea of the Mary Sue character and like what that means. And it's kind of the emergence on the scene of the Mary Sue.
The Mary Sue's been around for a while. It comes from basically fan fiction. You ever see Twilight? Belle's a Mary Sue. You ever see Disney trilogy? Ray's a Mary Sue.
Yeah.
Simply put, it comes from fan fiction. It's basically an infallible character that everybody likes, that has no agency whatsoever. That's usually a self-insert from the author. There's other definitions, but that's basically it. It's I call it the hero's journey. What you just said is our character was awesome all along. She just needed to believe it, which is not, that's it. And she doesn't believe it because of some unjust system like the patriarchy or some man. Yeah. That's the hero's journey. That's basically what a Mary Sue is. There is Gary Stu or Gary Sue. I can't remember what it's called now, but it's a male version of the same thing.
Yeah. Well, and it was fascinating because I remember when I watched, and again, not being totally immersed in this, but enjoying it. When I watched The Force Awakens, I came back. I had never done a movie review before. I'd never done a movie review. And I immediately went on Facebook and I said, well, I waited for this to come out on Redbox and I'm glad I did because, and one of the things I mentioned was, oh, look, what a new, fresh idea. We have a young orphan on a desert planet who, is scraping to get by. And then all of a sudden she's got these special powers. I guess she'll at least need a 60-second montage before she can do everything, right? Nope. Like she's an automatic, she can fly the Millennium Falcon better than Han Solo. She can lightsaber battle better than Luke, right? She doesn't need no Yoda. and you're sitting there going, this... Guys, even if you wanted to subvert the patriarchy, you got to realize this is the worst way to do it because there's no way to relate to this character.
No, but it's because films are produced now and not written. And I don't want to take like Jar Jar Abrams is terrible and Kathleen Kennedy is terrible. But I can totally imagine that there are, times where they're trying to take these female characters and make them somewhat human. And again, this is just me trying. Maybe I'm just completely off and nobody cares. but they're trying to make him human, and it's producers' notes coming in and going, nope, she can't be trained by a man. Why not? Well, that would be a man having power over a woman, and we don't want to. That's not what we want to portray. We are portraying female empowerment by having women act like men, which is basically it. They write characters for men and just put a woman in the role and think doesn't matter anymore because gender doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
And we're subverting the power dynamics of the blah, blah, blah. It's like, God, it's so academic. It comes from a professor who learned from another professor who have all never left a school and never lived a real life, God, it's terrible. Activism ruins everything. So,
and you see it too with what's been dubbed the MCU and everything else, and it seemed like I love what you said that they were produced, not written. It was this idea that there was some sort of activist agenda for everything. It was like, okay, I like what you've written here, but I needed to change everything in order to fit into our woke ideology of what we think the world should look like. What do you think? Let me ask you this. Do you think it's just the producers now, or do you think that the education system and Hollywood itself? Rogan was talking about this. Joe Rogan was talking a little bit about like this. There's this underlying culture within Hollywood, and it's gotten to the point where if you don't hold the right political views, forget about it. You're never getting a job. And so it kind of, there's this self-licking ice cream cone of, always producing not just the same kind of producers, but writers, actors. I mean, I don't, maybe the best grip. I don't know. Like, do you think it's come to a point right now where, it's kind of everybody within that culture, at least if they don't honestly believe it, they at least know they have to toe the line?
Yes, you're absolutely right. As a matter of fact, my good friend Chris Gore runs Film Threat, has been running articles, and it will be the rest of the year of anonymous WGA writers, Screen Actor Guild writers, who said exactly that. Like what Joe Rogan has said. He was spot on. Is there are, I would say, half of Hollywood at this point is still reasonably has reasonable classic liberals, people on the right, libertarians, people who are just non-political, common sense. I'd say that's still half of Hollywood. They're just scared to death to talk because of their own union. They're not only the union, the corporation. So they have two bosses basically policing their thought. And yeah, if you go off I think you could still be like a Nikki Haley Republican and somewhat survive in Hollywood. Mm-hmm. If you even mention Trump in not the most negative light possible, you're done. You're done. So everybody's just quiet. And that's the worst kind of, and I'll use their term, toxic environment, because you're walking on eggshells. And I'm starting to ask people, like, why do you even want to work there? And guess what they're saying? I don't. We're leaving. Wow. And for lack of a better term, there's a bit of a Hollywood bloodbath going on right now. And and it's because of the strikes. So there's massive layoffs. They're contracting, and they brought this all on themselves because they pissed off the audience, and they pissed off their own people. Yeah. Their own people are like, this isn't even fun. It's supposed to be fun. It's not even fun. It's not even close to fun anymore. And it's sad. We need people to, God, I wish I could go public with some of the people I've talked to behind the scenes who are like real directors and stuff, who are just normal people who just like, I love film. I want to direct film, but it's so impossible now. And a couple of them I'm talking to are we'll just say POCs. Yeah. And they hate that. They contacted me because they heard in one of my videos. I said, yeah, they're casting directors and producers and not hiring them. And they emailed me to say, exactly, that's it. That's how we felt. And we had a nice conversation. And it's especially when you hear it from their side, right? Yeah. It's really effed up because they're like, we want to earn this. We want to earn this. And it doesn't feel earned now. I'm always going to question it now. So on the human level, it's messed up, but they don't care. They've never cared about Hollywood, the executives. They don't care about your cause. They don't care about any of this. It's all about money. It's all about ESG money. And there's real evidence now that this is happening with the Oscar rules.
Yeah.
And now within the WGA and the Screen Actors Guild, there's surveys going on that basically you have to check your own boxes.
Yeah.
And we used to joke about it. It's like, oh, it feels like they're checking boxes for this movie. No, they literally are. There is evidence of it. And now it's not just enough to be a black man or a gay man. You need to be a black gay man, maybe with one leg, like
your intersectional score is not high enough.
Yeah,
if you've only
not
got one or
enough.
two grievances. I mean, you got to shoot to the top of that grievance pyramid. And it was funny. I was talking with somebody the other day. I was like, yeah, the left doesn't really like the left doesn't have a lot of use for white men until one puts on a dress. And then all of a sudden they're the very top of the grievance pyramid and they get whatever they want. So let me ask you this. So, because you brought up a good point here, and I want to unpack that a little bit. Because whenever we say this is all about money, people generally look at things like, well, wait a second, the box office dollars are in the toilet, right? Like, how can you do this many, bombs in a row and still say this is about the money? But then you mentioned something that's really important. I don't think people properly understand this because, if you're just looking at box office dollars, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, yeah, this is a money losing, thing that they're engaging in right now. But if you look at ESG and you look at BlackRock and you look at those sorts of dollars, which is in the trillions, now it's a different thing. So unpack that a little bit on the difference between it's still, for some of these guys, it's still about the money. It's just about where they're getting it.
Yeah, that's it. ESG is essentially a credit score, right? So environmental, social, governance, and it is run through BlackRock and Vanguard. I've had it in the video. The guy who runs BlackRock said back in 2017, we're going to force behaviors, and that's exactly what they did. Mm-hmm. I'm forgetting his name, but remember, he had presidential aspirations, and then he went to BlackRock, and he's all, yeah, this is way better than being a president. I have more control.
Yeah.
And he's right.
Yeah.
And God bless Texas for backing out of BlackRock, by the way. Thank you.
Yeah.
So that's how BlackRock, go look at what they own. A huge portion of Netflix, Warner Brothers, I'm not Microsoft. I mean, like, just across the board entertainment, and they're highly influential. So you time that with COVID, you time that with COVID stimulus, you time that with ESG and all the streaming platforms are released. And this is when what they've been building up for, this is what they were doing. We're going to spam you with content, content that no studio outside of Amazon could have afforded making. There wasn't enough money. It was unsustainable. They were always going to lose money, but they thought they would get it back with subscribers. And they're like, what a great time to social engineer. We can experiment like crazy because you're paying for it. Your retirement plan is paying for it. And by the way, it still is. It still is, especially if you're invested in a company like a Disney. And that's what paid for a lot of this stuff that was just flopping before our eyes for years. We're like, that's where the fan comes in because, we follow trends. But the normal people can like, hey, there was a time that if a movie flopped or a TV show flopped, it would be canceled. They wouldn't make a sequel and they wouldn't give it 5 seasons. And they're not doing that anymore. Why? Well, Star Trek Discovery's case, you can't cancel a series with a black female lead, the first non-binary character, the first blah, 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 lesbian this or lesbian that. This is how so the studio wants to cancel it, but they can't because of their own people now. And that they invited in, so I'm not going to not blame them. And they basically let the wolf in the door. It's the woke mind virus. The bankers don't pay attention to anything. They don't watch their own stuff. And these middle management guys are bringing in the DEI executives who are doctoring scripts and engineering. That's how it works. And it's worked for a few years until recently when the money dried up.
Yeah. Well, and that's one thing. The Federal Reserve just came in and announced, oh, we've defeated inflation. So now they can go back to doing all the things that cause inflation. Right. It's like, oh, well, thank you for telling us that you defeated the thing that you caused. And now you're going to go cause a whole hell of a lot more of it. But so that is a good point too, right? Because it's one thing when you look at, and I don't want to go too far down this route of inflationary monetary policy, but when you do have the United States government printing $3 trillion, right? It's not like this is going into the pockets of people working a 9 to 5. It's going directly into banking institutions. It's going into those places that have the best political pull. And then they utilize it. I mean, that's the only way you can explain the stock market going up when the economy is tanking, like when actual production is tanking. It's this fake money that's fueling everything. And the people that get their hands on it first get the most value out of it. And then by the time it trickles down to the rest of us, our a dozen eggs is $8. So do you think we're at a point where, because eventually reality kicks in? So is there ever going to be a point where the board at BlackRock or the investors, the major investors in BlackRock, look at their CEO and go like, hey, your little pet project was real cute when all this money was slushing through, but now it's time to actually get returns on investment? Does that ever happen, or do you think it just perpetuates itself?
Ooh. BlackRock had to recently disclose within the last month that their ESG stuff had damaged their brand. And Disney had to mention that too, because they have to for quarterly reports.
Yeah.
I'm a dummy. I am a major dummy. I know more. I've learned all this through my YouTube channel. I didn't know any of this before this, but I think it does. Will they change? I think these companies, I think BlackRock and Vanguard and Disney are just too damn big to be nimble. So no, I don't think it changes fast enough to keep up with the clients, the audience, the paying customer out there whose tastes are already changing. We're on the precipice. Things need to change, or the institutions fall. They start falling because people are losing faith in them. I just talk about it in pop culture. I think the institution of Hollywood has had its better days. We're past peak Hollywood, peak woke Hollywood, peak all of it. It's in decline. It's not even the most lucrative form of entertainment. Gaming dwarfs it. If you combine sports without apparel, I think gaming is bigger than sports if you don't add apparel and merchandising, which is insane. And then take music and Hollywood and combine them, and gaming still beats them by $100 million. So tastes are changing, entertainment is changing, and then you go to the serious stuff, like our real institutions, like the judicial. Mm-hmm. People are losing faith in that. But this is where it all comes together. Is the activist comes in to entertainment, say they come into Star Wars, they either take it over or destroy it. Either way, they win.
Yeah,
they're fine.
That's a great way to put it. We've talked a lot about like Antonio Gramsci and the march through the institutions, and a lot of that critical theory and neo-Marxist basically strategy to create a counterculture to the one that we already had. And it's hard to argue that they haven't been incredibly successful at it. And one of the biggest questions that we ask, and this is kind of a two-part, one of the biggest questions that we ask whenever we look at these institutions there are some institutions that you have to fight for. Like, so for politics, for instance, I get it. I'm in politics. It is enormously frustrating. And I would say that a lot of people are too obsessed by it. Like, I'm not saying don't do your due diligence and vote, run for office if that's your thing, be involved and understand what's going on. But we have to fight for that institution because they control the guys with the guns, right? We got to fight for that institution. There's other institutions, like I'm not telling anybody to waste any time fighting for Cal Berkeley. Right, dude, that's lost, right? You're not going to, because again, these people that talk about inclusion are the biggest gatekeepers on the planet. And once they get into an institution, they immediately close it off to anybody that doesn't think the way they do. Mm-hmm. So here's my question. When you do look at Hollywood, like, we cannot give up on the arts and entertainment. That's one of the biggest reasons we find ourselves in this situation. But when it comes to the major studios, is there any major studio in Hollywood right now that you think we could actually fight for, like fight within, take back over, or are they just all done?
Universal owns MSNBC, so they're really guilty for that. But I think on the entertainment side, they've really stayed out of it.
Why do you think that? Like explain that one a little bit on Universal and why you think that might be one that.
I think they've looked across at Disney and they've seen their mistakes. And when it comes to with Disney, and I think the same could be said for Universal. They get a lot of money from their parks. Disney gets funded by their parks. They make a crap load of money. And Universal, especially in Florida, has been digging into their market share, quite frankly, because they have more interesting stuff. They have Harry Potter.
They do.
Which is more popular than Star Wars now, and probably will be for the rest of the time, because it's kind of the millennial Star Wars. The Marvel superheroes that are at Disney are like the lame MCU ones, and Universal has the old school Marvel land. It's like old. It's my favorite part. So they have Mario, and they have Nintendo, which is just massive. So they are going to be carving into Disney's market share, and I think they're just going, don't interrupt your opponent when they're self-destructing. They're like, ah. So I don't know if they're worth fighting for. There's an artsy studio that I like called A24. Some of their stuff stinks, but some of it's really cool. There's, the Christian one, Angel Studios, is there in Utah. I think that's what it becomes. I think the big studios just fall apart, and it fractures into hopefully like a decentralized thing that where Hollywood is not in control anymore. You know, and that's where I think the one but I guess Universal would be the best. The worst, the one that can burn tomorrow, Disney. I think the world would be better off without Disney.
Which is just fascinating too. I've never seen a brand that was so universally popular in this country just overnight alienate. Well, and that's actually something I want to talk about, the alienation of the customer, because you've talked about this better than anybody else that I've seen talking about, that when Disney makes something now that nobody likes, their first instinct, sometimes before it's even gone out there, is let's see how hard we can attack our fan base. What the hell is going on with that? Why are they doing that?
They thought they could choose their audience. It goes down to ideology, right? When you start pushing everybody out and it becomes a giant echo chamber, you just think the politics are settled. Yeah. I'm right. They're wrong. There's nothing to discuss anymore. They're Nazis. And yeah, it really is the strangest marketing technique ever. It started with Ghostbusters. I don't think Sony started it. Yeah. But the whole movement of let's vilify the fans really took off with Ghostbusters 2016. And then Disney Star Wars kind of picked that up and made it an art form. And it's called fan baiting. And it became, and it didn't surprise me at all that about a year and a half, 2 years ago, it came out that, oh yeah, this is something the marketing departments are doing. Now, sometimes it's a third-party marketing department, but they're still hired by Disney. Yeah. And it's a way to kind of quell any criticism for a film by trying to other the fans, and I'll use their stupid language, and minimize them and just call it a pocket of alt-right trolls. Yeah, because, the alt-right and the Nazis love Star Trek and Doctor Who and Star Wars. Big contingent there. Yeah. The head of the neo-Nazis living in their mother's basement just really, really enjoys, watching this. What a bunch of crap. And and I think it was, but again, Disney surprises me more than anyone because it was so family oriented. I mean, it was really rooted in this culture of, family and kind of rising above, and and it was wholesome. It was designed to be wholesome exactly for that purpose. And they just went out of their way to go after that one first. And maybe it has something to do with what you were talking about before, where, look, if you can control children's perception of things, well, then you've got the next generation. And I know I started noticing this with my kids when, we have the internet, but we don't have cable. And, my girls loved Barbie, right? My girls love Barbie. And so, Daddy, watch Barbie with us. Okay, I'm going to be a good dad. Yeah. But I remembered little subtle things that would happen. You'd be watching a Barbie cartoon and the cartoon would all be about the evil, mean, rich, company owner that wanted to tear apart the forest to build their factory, and Barbie had to save it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is seriously? But I noticed that if I wasn't sitting there with my daughters going, hey girls, let's talk about this. Let me ask you some questions. Then their perception just would have been, anybody that owns a business can't wait to tear apart the forest in order to,
pave it over. And people would look at me like, Nick, aren't you being a little, crazier? No, I'm not. If that's your 7-year-old's impression, that's not by accident. They are setting something up for in the future. And so do you think that's why Disney was maybe targeted by this or turned this way so fast? Or do you think it's just they're one of the biggest guys on the block and this is just what happens?
I think what activists do is they latch on to what's popular, right? So I think and Bob Iger is considered this great deal maker, this great CEO. I think he's a fraud. All he does is buy stuff. He hasn't innovated anything, and the stuff he's bought, he's destroyed.
Yeah.
I can't speak to like his business relationship with the CCP. It was obviously good enough for him to thank a concentration camp in the film Mulan.
Yeah.
So I guess it's pretty good. But I think they just latched on to Disney and Bob Iger, the weatherman, who, I'm not going to say he's a dummy, but I think morally he's an empty head and an empty suit that would just go along because risk aversion is what brought in a lot of the activism.
Yeah.
I don't believe every CEO and every board member believes, the Marxist ideology. I believe that they are so afraid of being called racist and having their company branded that they're willing to, And listen, they agree with a lot of the DEI departments. They do. But it was risk aversion. It's much easier to call some of our fans Nazis and let the Marxists in the door. That's pretty much it. So I think the activists latched on to all the companies and had been, some of them had been there, but they own them now. They absolutely own them. Good luck. Disney, if Disney wanted to change, they couldn't.
Yeah.
They couldn't.
Which is crazy to me because I think a lot of us are, well, first of all, I appreciate the fact that you're pointing something out that I think a lot of people on the right need to understand. And that is not everything is a Bond villain with some sort of like master plan that step one is this and then step two is that. A lot of it is, like you said, it's if you're a company, and let's take 2020. If you're a company and you got COVID and you just watched a ton of cities in the United States burn over racism, well, then chances are you're going to say, okay, how do we put ourselves on the right side of this issue as quickly as possible? But if that means you hire certain producers or you hire certain people in your HR department or your or whatever it is, that they do have a much deeper ideological conviction towards something, well, then you're laying the groundwork for them to be calling the shots in 2, 3, 4 years. But here's what I think a lot of fans have been waiting for, and I want you to tell me whether or not you think this is possible or like we're all just, engaging in wishful thinking. When you see a movie like Top Gun Maverick come out, right? Or you see some other movies that have come out that have been kind of surprising and you think to yourself, okay, this is, they went back to kind of the old genre, the old character arc, the old thing. And guess what? The fans immediately came out and rewarded them for it, right? When you look at someone like Cavill walking away from The Witcher because he's tired of this, like you guys are destroying the lore. We started to think like, okay, maybe there's something here where the other studios, maybe one studio, right? Maybe a Universal is going to stand up and be like, you know what? We're not just going to not do what they're doing. We're going to do the exact opposite for a year. And we're going to prove that not only will you weather the storm, you will actually be highly profitable. Do you think there's any chance a major studio does that, or is it just too far gone?
Oof. There's a chance. But the Paramount is would have been one of those studios going through a fire sale right now. They're about to go under. Warner Brothers is massively in debt. They've kind of not been. They haven't been as they're dumb, but they haven't been as evil. See, Warner Brothers is dumb. Disney is evil. I'm trying to think. Universal might be the one that can turn around if they can make something good.
Yeah.
We're gonna find out next year. Yes, there is hope that they replicate the success, or they look at even Dune, which has plenty of political stuff, but it's hardcore sci-fi. Okay, that was written by a guy who liked his hallucinogenics back in the 60s. But and that's great. But it's doing well because it's just a well-made movie.
Yeah.
It is. It might not be your cup of tea, but like it's well made. You can't say it's not well made. It's really beautiful, and it's making a lot of money.
Yeah.
But it's basically traditional storytelling. And then Top Gun was great. Spider-Man was No Way Home, did great. Gimmick, I loved it, still love it, but still a gimmick. Super Mario did great. But in 2019, there was $9 billion films. Since then, there's been 6.
Wow.
6. And one of those was Top Gun Maverick. And I think Hollywood does like to replicate its success, but the thing is, it is really turned away from that. You brought up The Summer of Love, right? Things were failing in 2019. Despite all the success, there were movies like Terminator Dark Fate, which was just one of the worst things I've ever seen. But that came out the same year. Joker came out, a great movie that cost $50 million.
Yeah.
Hollywood learned nothing. Absolutely nothing. Summer of Love comes up, and it really, a trend that was dying got new life.
Mm-hmm.
Got new life. And things got, I don't know if woker is a word, but I'm going to make it a word. Woker than ever. Woker than ever. And they're not back yet. So we'll know in 2025. We know Marvel's trying to turn things around. I don't think they can. Star Wars is dead. I think the hope is original content and...
Okay, so original content.
Yeah.
I had super high hopes for Rebel Moon.
Oh, me too. I wanted it to be good.
I got about 20 minutes into it. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, they've gone through every little stupid trope in 5 minutes. None of this is believable. Like, let me get this straight. We have this massive intergalactic empire. Boy, what does that sound like? Right. And then it shows up, and where do they land their shuttle? Well, on a planet, because they're looking for a rebel. And they come across some farmers that look like they're farming in the 18th century.
Yep.
Right. And they're just so desperate for their crops. I'm like, this.
They want their grain. I know.
Like the total amount of grain these people grow in a year wouldn't feed your kitchen staff on that ship.
No.
Like, it's little stuff like that where I'm like, this just. And then, of course, homegirl who weighs $125 soaking wet kicks the living piss out of like an entire
5'5",
squad of Space Marines.
Yeah,
like,
I know.
oh my gosh.
In slow motion for 3 hours. It's terrible.
So like even the original content, I'm like, you gotta be kidding me.
I know. And I don't want, like, genre is my favorite and I don't want it to die, but there's been so much just subversion out there, like Rings of Power. They didn't need to go that route, but they did. And now they're stuck with it for 5 years, which is going to be great.
Well, do you think there's any, so, okay, Amazon's a little different, right? Them doing Rings of Power, nobody associated Amazon so much with this, like, you know, like Universal or Paramount or Warner Brothers or whatnot. And so this was their first big, like, hey, we're taking some really popular IP and we're gonna put this spin on it. And I remember Bezos gets up there and says his son's a huge Lord of the Rings fan, and Dad, don't screw this up. And sorry, son, your dad screwed it up.
Your dad screwed it up.
Is there any saving that?
No, not that show. I mean, with Netflix, no, that show is done. It's cooked. It's committed to 5 seasons. I predict 3. One's supposed to come out this year. We haven't heard a thing about it. It's been shot for almost a year. We haven't heard anything, and that's just weird. Yeah. Because House of the Dragon finished shooting after them, and we have release dates. We have a trailer dropping today as we record, all kinds of stuff. But what's weird with Netflix and Amazon is they put out this garbage, but then they'll put, because they put out so much stuff, they put out really good stuff. Terminalist, really good. Yeah. Reacher season 1, better than season 2, really good. On Netflix, I just watched The Gentleman. Banger show. Great show by Guy Ritchie. Based in the same world as the movie The Gentleman. But different characters. Absolutely could not recommend it higher. It's freaking great. So we still, and One Piece from last year, which was amazing. But but then they put out other, like Netflix has Cuties. It's like, oh my god, it's like,
just straight up.
So for a studio, I think they really just, if there's going to be hope, they have to take baby steps and I think that's going to be lessening their budgets. We'll get more action movies, which I am completely for because they're cheaper. People seem to love them. They're really making a comeback. Thank God. And I think we'll see it through that, and hopefully there'll be a great independent movement and the great fracturing and decentralization of Hollywood. That's where the hope comes from, is some independent creator, because Hollywood legislated AI out, and like whether you like AI or not, it's here. There's nothing we can do about it. And AI, as far as on the artistic side, creating graphics, this will affect gaming too. It's going to put a lot of people out of work, but it's going to be a lot easier for a 15-year-old kid to make an entire movie at his house. So that's where the future is.
I run into people all the time who are I think rightfully concerned about AI, but by the same token are saying, well, we've got to make it illegal. Like, that's not going to happen. Like there's no unringing this bell. The question is it going to develop in such a way to where it's open, the way like an Elon Musk kind of wants to do it, versus these other things. And then, as soon as Hollywood attempting to legislate out AI would be a little bit like the horse and buggy industry going like, we need to get rid of these cars, right? Like
let's hand it over to our closest competition, But now the audience is the competition. We entertain ourselves now, and we're as big as gaming is, we're carving into Hollywood's market share with podcasts and just doing all this stuff on our own. And like, that's what I watch. I watch podcasts and watch them, listen to them, watch streaming way more than I watch a scripted show. Like,
if you would have told me 5 years ago that YouTube would be my primary source of entertainment, I would have said you were nuts.
Yep.
But it is now. And it's not that I don't still watch the occasional movie or show. I do. But I'll tell you another thing that's interesting. My wife has got me watching a K-drama right now. And I've sat here and watched 13 episodes with subtitles. Why? Because at no point in this show have they ever tried to throw I mean, there's some subtle stuff here and there, but for the most part, characters are pretty interesting. Dialogue's interesting. Nobody has tried to trans their 4-year-old yet to make a statement. Like, I'm like, holy crap. Okay. I guess I'm down for the next 14 episodes of this thing.
The Easter, again, market share is an important thing. And, Asia's doing it. Like I said, One Piece, the best show I saw last year. It's based on a Japanese anime and manga. Best movie I saw, Godzilla -1. And it's all subtitled. And if you haven't seen it, it's a phenomenal film. It's not just about Godzilla crushing a city. That's in there. It's actually way more than that. It should have been in normal times, which we're no longer in when people cared about the Oscars. It should have been nominated for Best Picture easily. It's that good.
Well, you know what I thought was fascinating? Didn't it win something like Best Visual Effects?
It did.
With
on
a
budget
fraction.
$15 million for the entire film. 35 people worked on the effects. Just to give you an example, on your average Marvel movie, it's like 300. 300 or more.
Yeah.
Working on the effects. 35 people.
Wow.
And it's brilliant. It's such a good movie. The story in it it's gut-wrenching, and it's good, and there's a good redemption arc. It's good.
And I think some of these people too that are concerned about things like AI or technology becoming more available and easier to access for just regular people, right? Not just monster studios. People get worried like, okay, this is going to cost jobs. This is going to cost writers. It's like, whoa, wait a second. Every time there's a massive technological shift, and this could be one of the biggest in 100 years, right? I'll acknowledge that.
Easily.
You're always going to have a transition point, right? But I don't think anyone would go back now and be like, gosh, those damn tractors, right? We used to require 40 farmers to do this. It's like people adapt. There's always new needs. New innovation creates new jobs that wouldn't have existed before. Is that when it comes to entertainment, when it comes to things like AI, or YouTube, again, you've got 1 million subscribers. And I want people to understand this too, because we do a lot of work on social media, but I would say that up until this point, 80% of the work we've done on social media has been short form, right? When you're doing medium and long form production, which that has been primarily what you've done, it is much harder to get up to that 1 million mark. Because you're having to capture people's attention for 15, 30, 45 minutes. Like that takes talent, that takes skill. But YouTube has allowed a lot of people that would have been gatekept right out of Hollywood.
Yes.
So is that your hope? Do you think that we're not just going to see podcasts and people filming that, or like maybe the Mr. Beast approach, do you think we're actually going to start to see people doing something more along the lines of like what we would expect out of a sitcom, but on YouTube?
Yes. It's already happening. It hasn't like blown up yet because the algorithm doesn't allow that. But as more people realize, like my friend Will, the Critical Drinker, he's a writer, and he's doing a short film based on his books, Ryan Drake books. It's going to be about 20-25 minutes long, and he's just putting it on his YouTube channel. And I think, yes, that is absolutely going to happen, especially as things get cheaper, and people, there's been an evolution on YouTube. It used to be cat videos and meme videos and horrible videos and, first videos of people's babies, and it's evolved into a lot of things. And it is now the most watched thing in living rooms. Yeah. More than Netflix, more than anything is YouTube. So absolutely. And it will be the independent hub. I believe so. Yes. And there's going to be some changes here with Google, and hopefully they don't break it. So if Alphabet doesn't break it and just like lets it go and lets people create and not cancel people or censor people, I think it will be brilliant. I think it'll be absolutely brilliant.
And we talk a lot about about a lot of things on our show with Making the Argument and whatnot that are controversial, we hit all the topics, and we don't shy away from it. And we've never had a problem with YouTube. And I don't know if they kind of maybe decided to, because for a while there it looked like they were going every bit as hard as
it was bad.
Oh yeah. And I don't know if like Elon Musk purchasing Twitter or just like the overall backlash that we saw or alternatives popping up caused YouTube to kind of take a couple steps back, because every once in a while something will pop up. Every once in a while they may demonetize like a particular thing that we do, but we have not experienced the same degree of threats. And we've got I think we're at about 890,000 subscribers on our channel now. We've not experienced the same sort of threats that a lot of other people have in this space talking about the same things. Do you think they've kind of like quietly backed away a little bit?
I think they have.
Okay.
Because the election year was insane.
Yeah.
2020 was absolutely insane. There was interference going on. This is when Mama Susan was running YouTube, and people were disappearing left and right. The one guy I think about, the former, he's a Earthward Jim artist, Doug TenNapel. He got his channel pulled. All these political channels got pulled. Yeah. About 3 months before the election. And then the weirdest thing happened ever. And this was amongst my friends. In October and November, which are really good times for YouTube, especially November, I didn't gain it's the only time I never gained or lost a sub. It just froze. The number froze for a month. And I'm like, that's not even possible. So, it is much better now. Doug TenNapel's back. So are many others. Wish Alex Jones was. But you know what? Alex Jones can show up on shows. He showed up on a couple of mine, and he can show up on shows, and it's not like it was. So I definitely think it's better. You don't have to like these people, but they have the right to talk.
Yeah.
And that's it's like up to you as an adult to decide, not some government or some arbitrary SJW who may or may not be in this country, by the way.
Yeah.
So I think things are a little better. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we've talked about a lot of stuff here. I really appreciate your time. I want to do one last thing, and I want to do a lightning round. I'm going to throw questions at you. These are the tough ones, right? This is when we ask you about favorites. So this is going to be like choosing between your children for you on some of this stuff, but we demand answers. All right. So question 1, favorite comic book character?
Spider-Man.
Okay. Favorite
Daredevil, number close second.
2. All right,
I know it's lightning round, but
we'll let you do it 2. That's fair. That's fair.
Thanks.
All right. Again, you're like choosing between your kids here. I get it. All right.
Yeah.
Favorite Star Wars movie of all time?
Empire Strikes Back.
All right. What's your least favorite of all time?
The Last Jedi.
All right. Yeah, that's fair. That's definitely fair. All right. Favorite Star Wars character?
Ooh. Han Solo.
See, I'm telling you, man, everyone's actually a Han Solo fan. All right. Favorite, let me see here. Sci-fi, or you can only pick one, sci-fi or fantasy?
Fantasy.
All right. Nice. Favorite fantasy series or movie?
Oh, that's Lord of the Rings, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty epic. All right, here we go. Question number, this is the last one I'm going to do on this one, all right? But I'm going to give you a little bit of time to think about this because it is a big one, right? If you could redo one of the latest travesties that Hollywood's, one of the IPs that they've destroyed, and by Hollywood, I'm including everybody in the arts and entertainment industry, right? I'm just using it broadly. Which one would it be, right? And who would you pick to fix it with you?
Oh, God. And I get to pick anybody I want.
You get to pick anybody you want.
I think it would have to be Star Wars because it's more culturally important. Selfishly, it'd be Doctor Who, but like I think it would have to be Star Wars. And I would pick a brain trust of authors, from authors who wrote the EU. Alan Dean Foster would come to mind. And I bring in George, too. Yeah. As much as he betrayed everybody just a couple of days ago by siding with Iger, I'd bring in George. And we'd have to find our Gary Kurtz out there. I don't know who would that be. It's not Spielberg. Somebody to rein in George who would be really good. I would say he had a terrible movie that just came out. But I'm still partial to Matthew Vaughn. Okay. Matthew Vaughn, who directed The Kingsman. Yeah. I think he's got a good balance of fun. I think Argyle, I think his wife forced him to do it, but I bring in him and Mark Millar. He's a comic book writer, but he's a big nerd. That would be my brain trust. It's bizarre, but I think it would work.
No, I appreciate that because, my bet was you were either going to go redo Rings of Power or Star Wars. That was going to be my bet. I'm glad you picked Star Wars in part because I feel like the Lord of the Rings series was just such an offshoot of the obviously Tolkien's story and the Peter Jackson series, which I think was done well. And I know a lot of people had a problem with The Hobbit, but I liked it fine. I didn't find it offensive. I just, maybe a little long, but I almost feel like Rings of Power is so separated from it that you could completely dismiss it and be just fine. But what they've done to Star Wars is at a point where I wish we could like go back to George and everybody else and, again, bring your team together and say, look, we're all going to agree that you can keep Rogue One. You can keep Solo if you want. I don't care. You can keep Rogue One, but the other, they're done. They never happened. We're just going to forget it and move on from
Everything's
here.
Gone.
Yeah.
Everything's gone. I'd bring in the best brain trust in Hollywood, bring in Chris Nolan if you wanted to, because like fixing Star Wars would culturally be important because it would lead other franchises to go down that road. But unfortunately, like it's just too late. There's no fixing it now. The only way to fix it now, dude, you could put this with Marvel, Star Trek, Doctor Who, Star Wars, put them in the vault for 20 years. Just end them. That's like sell toys from the older ones if you need to make money off sell T-shirts, but like, and then Rings of Power I just wish didn't exist. Like I don't need any more Tolkien adapted at all. Just end it. Okay, stop. Which sucks because as kids we all wanted to see. I want to see Silver Surfer. I want like everything. One of the greatest fantasy stories of all time is out there, and they just haven't done anything. Conan. Mm-hmm. But now I don't want him to touch Conan. Yeah. And we know why. Actually, there was a Conan series at Amazon, and Jennifer Salk, and the two guys who ran House of the Dragon were the showrunners of it, and she got rid of it because of toxic masculinity. Yeah, of course. Conan's now a trans woman. And we're gonna get a Red Sonja fighting the patriarchy. That'll be great. And the greatest thing is no longer scattering your enemies before you and hearing the lamentations of their women. No, right. The greatest thing now is, I don't know, a group of... Know your pronouns. Yeah, sociology department at Cal Berkeley deciding, what sort of bugs to eat. But well, listen, I want to thank you very much, Gary, for coming on. Listen, tell everybody real quick, if you can, when's your book coming out? What's the title?
And then, of course, we want everyone to go over, check out Nerdrotic. And don't just go on there and watch it, right? Like, subscribe. It matters, right? Go on there, subscribe, like, comment. All of that stuff is really helpful. But when's the book coming out?
The book is coming out within the next 2 or 3 months. I don't have an exact date because we're still working on a few things. It's called Waiting for Nerdrotic.
Nice.
It's got some subtitle that I can't remember right now. Yeah. But yes, I'll let you know. But but summer for sure.
Okay, great. Yeah, so go over there. Again, like and subscribe over at Nerdrotic. And follow them on the other social media platforms, right? Instagram, X, all of that. Go over there, follow. Again, this is going to be something. If you're anything like me, and you enjoy kind of hearing like good analysis from someone that both understands the industry, understands the lore, understands the tradition within these movies and whatnot, but also has a good understanding of what's going on culturally and politically in the country as well. I am telling you, I have spent far more time watching reviews from Nerdrotic than I have the actual movies. Because honestly, I get more enjoyment and entertainment out of that. And again, you want to go back, you want to fight all this crap that's going on, cancel Disney Plus, go onto YouTube, find people that have some shared values with you that are doing some really good work and doing deep dive analysis. So once again, Gary, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to everyone that's been watching. Don't forget to go over there and like and subscribe, and we will see you next episode.